Chapter 9. Pre-flight. 10:14 p.m. Plissken walked between Hauk and Rem. It was obvious that they were uneasy in his company since they had taken the cuffs off him. It was just as obvious that he hated being in that particular corner of the universe at that particular time. He hated Hauk, hated him just like he hated any blackbelly. Oh, the man wore a suit and talked about prerogatives, but he was still the head killer in a society of killers. Witchfinder General. He couldn't forgive the man that. Forgiveness was nowhere to be found within the countless reflecting shards of the broken mirror that was Plissken's spirit. "In here," Rem said. They turned into a door marked Material Disbursement. The room was painted battleship grey. It had a counter that slashed its width. On the other side of the counter, a cage, floor to ceiling. Within the cage were neatly stacked shelves of supplies that stretched far back into darkness. Hauk flicked a switch beside the door, and several banks of neon lit sequentially down the length of the storeroom. It went way back. Rem dug down into his pocket and pulled out a chain of keys. He moved around the counter and started trying them in the cage lock. He'd try one, shake the lock until it rattled the whole cage, curse softly, then try another. "You know, I haven't had anything to eat," Plissken said. "For how long?" Hauk asked. Then to Rem. "We haven't got all night." "The motherfuckers aren't marked," Rem said, his voice edged with frustration. "Just take it easy." "Since yesterday," Plissken said. "Goddamn son of a bitch," Rem muttered. "Well, you look well fed to me," Hauk said. "It's your game," the snake shrugged. "But if it was me, I'd want every advantage I could get. I sure wouldn't send some half-starved—" "You made your point," Hauk interrupted. "We'll take care of it." "Ha!" Rem yelled. "Wouldn't you know it'd be the last goddamn one?" He creaked open the cage door and hurried back down the rows of equipment. He got a leather survival holster and started sticking various items into it. Hauk looked at Plissken, then stared down the aisle to see where Rem was. "Look," he said, voice low. "I know I'm not in any position to ask you for favors, but I've got a relative inside." His voice was hoarse. "You've got priorities here, I know, but if you could just keep an eye out for him." "What the hell am I supposed to do, Hauk? Ask 3 million crazy people for their names and addresses?" The man waved it off. "No, damn it. I don't need to know anything except if he's there." He held up a clenched fist. "He's got a tattoo." He pointed to his 4 fingers just below the knuckles. "The letters HAUK, 1 on each finger." Plissken frowned. It'd be a cold day in Miami Beach before he did a favor for Hauk. "Well, if I see him, I'll tell him to drop you a line." Hauk's eyes flashed for a second, but he didn't say anything. "Here we go," Rem's voice said. He came back through the cage and locked the door. Standing on the business end of the counter, he dumped the contents of the holster onto its top. It was a large wraparound holster, compartmentalized like an electrician's. It could hold a lot. The guns were the first thing that caught the snake's attention. There were 2 automatics, a handgun and a breakdown rifle. Plissken hadn't held a gun since Leningrad. He reached out and gingerly ran a palm over each weapon. They were smooth and cold. Deadly. Snake Plissken with a gun was like Samson with shoulder-length hair. "The bullets carry a charge," Hauk said, thrusting his hands away from each other. "Explodes on impact. You don't have to be a crack shot. Just hit what you're aiming at." "I will," Plissken answered. He glanced at the other items. A flare pistol, K-rations, a big crystal chunk that he assumed was amphetamine, infrared goggles, and a small 2-way radio. There was also a large 4-pointed metal spur that looked sharp and lethal at close range. His eyes skipped over the tactical gear, always returning to gaze at the guns. "Double his rations, would you?" Hauk said. "He's a growing boy, and he's hungry." Rem went back into the cage, this time remembering which key was which. "I'll need some extra ammo magazines," Plissken said, unable to get his eyes off those guns. Hauk noticed his interest. "Know how to use them?" "Do rabbits have a sex life?" Rem came back in and threw some greenish-brown tins on the counter. "Extra rations," he said. "And a few more ammo magazines," Plissken added, tabbing open a can of pound cake. Rem winked and reached into his jacket pocket. He dropped several loaded magazines onto the counter. Plissken nodded and stuffed the whole piece of cake into his mouth. "It's a whole different world in there," Rem said. "It's very tribal, very survival-oriented." He leaned against the counter and looked at Plissken, deadly serious. The snake smiled at him through his mouthful of cake. "They split along race and ethnic lines. White, black, Chicano, Indian, Oriental, European." He took a breath. "It even breaks down farther. Women, homosexuals, religious, old people, and the crazies. Some of them have cars. They took junkers left behind and converted them to steam. We think they may also have a gasoline source in there, and power. They have it selectively, although God knows how they do it." "He does?" Plissken asked, swallowing the dry lump of cake. "Who?" "God." Rem made a face and started talking again. Plissken listened with half an ear as he got into a tin of peaches. They thought they were telling him something. Plissken had been down so many roads that most of them were named after him. "They have greenhouses and rigged up generators. Some areas even have streetlights. The crazies live in the subways. They have full control of the underground." He stopped just because Plissken was slurping loudly on peach juice. The snake stopped, looking at the man over the rim of the can. "The crazies," Rem continued. "Well, they're night raiders." Plissken set the tin back on the counter, wiping his mouth on the back of his sleeve. He sifted through the equipment laying in front of him. He held up a strange, round object with a push-button inset. "What's this?" "Tracer," Hauk said. "Sends a radio signal for 15 minutes. If you push it, we can track you on radar." Plissken held it between thumb and index finger, examining. "Had these in the army." This one's different, Hauk said, taking it from him. He twisted the thing hard against itself. Half the barrel turned. Safety catch, he said. Nice toy. Plissken returned, and picking up the peach can, he finished the rest of the juice. We could brief you for days, Rem began. The snake looked at him like a gambler looking at the taxman. Let's just get it over with, huh? Now the man wants to get it over with, Hauk said, his face hard. By God, I'll vote for that. Pack up your gear, soldier, and we'll get underway. Plissken started stuffing the equipment back into the holster. Yeah, I could use some fresh air, he said. He got the bulky pack filled and strapped it around his waist. Hauk was already walking out the door. Snake sauntered at his own pace behind the man. Hauk was finally forced to stop in the middle of the hall and wait. You mentioned the gull fire, Plissken said. Where in the hell am I supposed to land it? On top of the World Trade Center, Hauk returned, and he didn't even flinch. Just like that, Plissken said. You're Snake Plissken, aren't you? Hauk shot back. Besides, it's the only place you can land. He started walking again. They won't see you up there, and when you come back, you can take off from freefall. Plissken chuckled softly. You really expect me to make it back? Hauk ignored him and kept talking. You can locate the president from his vital signs bracelet. It gives off a sync pulse. Use this. Getting into his pocket, Hauk fished something out. He handed it to Plissken, a small round object. It looked like a miniature compass. Homing device, Hauk said. It shows direction and distance. Plissken eyeballed it once, then threw the thing into the holster with the rest of the gear. They came to some stairs and went up. The surroundings were beginning to look familiar to Plissken. They had gone underground and ended up back in the in-processing bunkers where he had originally been brought. He couldn't believe that Hauk would just give him a gull fire and turn him loose. Judicious use of the jetpacks and an expert at the rudder could give the gull fire a virtually unlimited range. And Plissken was an expert. Hauk took him into a small examination room set off to the side of a dimly lit, totally empty ward. His eye was throbbing worse than usual, but he knew that it was the combination of the rain and the proximity of all the black-suited slime. The pain in his side had settled to a dull ache that would form an ugly black and yellow bruise by morning, if he lived that long. The examination room was just the same size as the steri chamber, but in here the table was padded and covered with a starched white sheet. There was a cabinet in a corner, glassed in, but lockable. It was filled with small sealed jars of clear medicine. Next to that was a machine set on a table. It was not over large, but was literally covered with dials and gauges. An old man with a rugged face and a white lab coat stood near the examination table. He was filling a syringe from one of the small medicine bottles. The man seemed disturbed about something. It translated into silence as Hauk and Plissken came through the door. Is everything ready? Hauk asked without a greeting. The man gave Hauk a sidelong glance. Yes, he said simply. Then the old man wandered over to Plissken. It seemed to the snake that the man was almost afraid to look at him, that he wanted to see him, but not to see him at the same time. The man finished filling his needle, then just stood there, holding it, like a hunter with his rifle grounded until something comes along to shoot. Plissken gulped, feeling uneasy. He wasn't much for shots. He disliked pain a lot more when he knew it was coming. "Is that for me?" he asked sheepishly. "Strong antitoxin," Hauk said. "Stops bacteria and viral growth for 24 hours. "Take off your jacket," the man with the needle said. "Then roll up your sleeve." Plissken crossed his arms over his chest. "That's okay," he said. "Don't need it. I'll be all right, really." "Let's go, Plissken," Hauk said. "But I don't like needles." "Plissken?" The snake sighed and slipped out of his jacket, letting it drop to the floor. He walked over to the examination table, hopping up backward to sit on it. He rolled up his khakied sleeve. The man with the needle came closer. Trying to ignore the whole business, Plissken diverted his attention to Hauk, who had walked over to the machine with all the dials. He clicked some switches and a number lit up on the machine. 230005. He narrowed his gaze to take that in when he felt the sharp stab of the needle going into his arm. He grimaced slightly. "Over in a second," Cronenberg said in his best fatherly voice. Hauk got into a small box next to the machine. He came out with a wristwatch. He walked back over to Plissken, setting the dial as he did so. "There," Cronenberg said, and pulled the thing out of Plissken's arm. "Now that wasn't too bad, was it?" "Then you sit here, and I'll do it to you," the snake replied. He was just into rolling down his sleeve when Hauk strapped the wristwatch on him. It had a readout like the machine's. Hauk pushed a button on the side. The readout light began blinking. 2300 hours and 1 second, 2300 hours, 2200 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds. Hauk watched the blinking numbers for a few seconds, then looked up at Plissken. He said, 22 hours, 59 minutes, 57 seconds. The snake looked from the watch to the man's face. It was a countdown watch. "We talked about 24, he said to the commissioner. Hauk looked at Cronenberg. It was the kind of look that said, "Get your ass as far away from me as you can get." The old man drifted to the other side of the room immediately and began fiddling with the machine. Hauk turned his glacier eyes back to Plissken. "In 22 hours, the Hartford Summit meeting will be over. China and the Soviets will go back home." Plissken watched Cronenberg with his good eye. The doctor had pulled 2 long rubber tubes out of the back of the machine and was fiddling with them. "The president was on his way to that summit when his plane went down," Hauk continued. "He has a briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. The tape recording inside has to reach Hartford in 22 hours. "What's on it?" Plissken asked. He watched as Hauk worked his lips against themselves. "Do you know anything about nuclear fusion?" he asked. The snake put up his hands. "Never mind," he said. I don't want to know. The doctor was walking back to the table, back behind Plissken. He had the tubes in his hands. They were attached to the machine, stretching back and bouncing like monstrous rubber bands. We're talking about the survival of the human race, Plissken, Houck said, but it lacked conviction. Something you don't give a shit about. Cronenberg spoke from behind. I'm going to inject you, he said dryly. It'll sting for a second or two. The snake didn't have a chance to complain. He didn't even have a chance to ask the doctor what was going to be coming out of those 2 rubber tubes. The man just placed them quickly on either side of his neck and pushed a button. The tubes were compressed air guns. He felt a bite, then a pop, and for just a second it felt like someone was pinching the hell out of his neck. Then, just as quickly as it had come, the pain stopped. Cronenberg removed the tubes, and Plissken brought his hands up to feel the spots. They were tender to the touch. He heard Houck sigh and looked up at the man. His face had relaxed somewhat, as if some good and positive thing had just happened. That's it, Plissken, he said. Cronenberg's voice was cold as January behind him. Tell him, the man said. Tell me what? Plissken snapped. Houck moved across the room, almost as if he were physically needing to put distance between himself and Plissken. About that idea you've got about turning the Gullfire around 180 degrees and flying off to Canada. Plissken jerked his head around to Cronenberg. The man's face was pasty white. His eye began twitching madly under the patch. What did you do to me? He demanded. My idea, Houck said from the other side of the small office. He was puffed up, trying to look big and mean. He was out of practice. Something we've been fooling around with. 2 microscopic capsules lodged in your arteries. They're already starting to dissolve. He took his eyes from Plissken and paced his corner of the room in a tight circle. In 22 hours, the cores will completely melt. Inside the cores are small heat-sensitive charges. Not a large explosion, about the size of a pinhead. Just enough to open up both of your arteries. He stopped walking, turned his head, and stared hard at the snake. I'd say you'd be dead in 10-15 seconds. The pain charged through Plissken's eye, and he was off the table, jumping towards Houck. He hit the man hard, hand in a death grip on his throat. The momentum carried them back to bang into a concrete wall. Houck groaned loudly. Take him out! Plissken screamed, squeezing hard on Houck's neck. Eyes bulging, breath caught in his throat, Houck had his pistol out, jammed into Plissken's stomach. But the snake was well beyond that. He'd go gladly if he could take Bob Houck along with him. Plissken was vaguely aware of Dr. Cronenberg beside him. The man was shaking visibly, mouth working. He was talking. Plissken picked it up with half an ear, then listened to it all. They're protected by the cores, Cronenberg was yelling. But 15 minutes before the last hour is up, we can neutralize the charges with an X-ray. His hands were on the snake's arm, touching, gently touching. Well, we can stop it, Snake. We can stop it. Plissken looked at a gagging Hauk, then at Cronenberg's deep, worried eyes. He released the man's throat. Deep, husky sounds came from Hauk as he staggered away from the grey wall, hand up to his throat, massaging. He holstered his gun. Plissken tried to swallow the anger back down to the boiler within him. He looked at the watch. It read 22 hours, 47 minutes, 1 second. Hauk was taking deep breaths. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "We'll burn out the charges, if you have the president." Plissken glared at him. "What if I'm late?" Hauk straightened his tie. "No more Hartford Summit. No more Snake Plissken." Plissken bent down and picked up his leather jacket, draping it over his arm. He was calm again, thinking, adjusting. He stared fire at Hauk. "When I get back," he said, "I'm going to kill you." The commissioner accepted that at face value. He even smiled slightly. "The Gullfire's waiting," he said.